The New York Giants fall 31-18 to the Detroit Lions. Going to get into what happened, what went wrong, and then we're going to go straight into Giants-Cowboys matchup. Who to watch, key matchups, predictions, and a lot more. Stay tuned. What is up, Giants fans? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Tommy's Takes. As always, I'm your host, Tommy G. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. Please subscribe, like, turn notifications on. Just hit our 400 subscriber. Thank you. Every single person that has subscribed means the world to me and the Giants Country team. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And please do check out Giants Country. Awesome group of content Giants creators out there. You name it, articles, podcasts, interviews, covering all the bases. So make sure you check them out. So let's get right into it. We got a packed show today. First, we're going to get into the Lions game. What happened? What went wrong? There was a lot. And then from there, we're going to go into the Cowboys-Giants Thanksgiving Day game. We're going to break down matchups, who to watch, and how the Giants could plug away here with all these injuries. But first up, Giants fall 31-18. It was a messy, undisciplined, and honestly uncharacteristic game for the Giants. The game was marred by penalties, turnovers, missed opportunities, and what made it all worse was the injury bug. And, we seem to talk about it every week on this show, how the Giants are cursed with injuries. And yesterday was a doozy. And we'll get more into the official injury report. Still fairly early in the week, so, injury reports are a little bit skittish in the beginning of the week. But we got some bad news today on the forefront of injuries. Giants lose Wan'Dale Robinson for the entire season, torn ACL. So unfortunate for the kid. Coming off, he was having a career game, 100 yards receiving. He fought through an injury all week to play. Obviously was injured earlier in the season. Plays the game, has a career game, and tears his ACL towards the end. So prayers up to Wan'Dale Robinson. He's going to be a fine player in this league, but that's a tough injury. When you're already looking at Shepard out for the year, Kadarius Toney traded to the Chiefs. You're looking barren at the wide receiver position. And if it couldn't get any worse, you now lose Adoree Jackson, 4 to 6 weeks with an MCL injury. Injured while returning a punt. And we'll get to that after also. So no rest for the weary. Giants right back at it Thursday versus Dallas, who just blew the doors off Minnesota on the road 40-3. So Giants got to pick their bootstraps up and get ready because it's not going to get any easier. But let's get into the game versus Detroit. Giants came into the game confident, winning last 5 out of 6 games. But Detroit had an excellent game plan. Let's just be honest. They were going to force anyone other than Saquon Barkley to beat them. Saquon finished the game with 15 carries for 22 yards. There were no running lanes. There was nowhere to go. Also didn't really look like himself. There was a play where he got tackled towards the sideline and he grabbed his shoulder. Looks like it's the same shoulder he originally hurt versus Green Bay. And after that game, he said, this might be an injury I'm going to have to deal with. So along with the mountain of injuries, the slew of injury the Giants have, Saquon's dealing with something with his shoulder because he didn't look right. I mean, it wasn't his fault why they couldn't rush the ball. The offensive line was brutal, but something not right there, something to keep an eye on. O-line struggled. We'll put it that way. We'll put it nicely. Coaching staff was trying to mix up the lineups. You had Feliciano at center. You had Gates in there, Azudu. You had Pert. You had Shane Lemieux start the game. Shane Lemieux was brutal. We'll call it rusty. We'll be nice. Shane Lemieux was rusty. I think he had 6 pressures allowed in 30-something snaps. He didn't last long. He was pulled. But the offensive line was brutal. It's probably their worst game since the Dallas matchup in Week 3. And it showed, the lack of rushing attack forced the Giants to be one-dimensional. It will force them to be a passing team. And it was rough sledding for the most part. Giants up 6-3. 6 minutes left in the second quarter. Daniel Jones drops back. Doesn't see 6'7" Aiden Hutchinson drop back into coverage. Aiden Hutchinson makes a beautiful play. It's a shame because Darius Slayton was open on that play on the drag route. But Aiden Hutchinson makes an awesome play, jumps up in the air, and snags Jones' first interception in 153 pass attempts. That was definitely a momentum turner because the Giants were up 6-3. They had a little drive starting, and boom, before you know it, the Lions have the ball in Giants territory. Hutchinson did have a little bit of a return on that. And Lions scored on that drive and unfortunately never looked back. Giants tried to pass the ball successfully again. Later in the third quarter, Jones drops back, another interception, overthrow. It was on 4th and 5. Really wasn't much open on the play. As far as I could tell from the TV broadcast, that was his second interception of the game. That was also tough because it was 4th and 5, and it was in Detroit territory. But for the most part, I thought Daniel Jones had a solid game. Not a good game. You win when you don't turn the ball over, and that's what the Giants have seen, not only with the offense, but with Daniel Jones. When he doesn't turn the ball over, Giants win. Very simple. Turned the ball over twice on Sunday himself. Giants lose the game. Did pass for 345 yards, which was nice to see. I know everybody was clamoring for the big passing game for DJ. Don't think it was in this type of fashion, though. And, when you think about it with Daniel Jones, it's tough. It's been a debate for a long time now, and I don't think we could really fully say he's ever had a full complement of weapons at the same time. And those that are not fans of Daniel Jones or do not think he's a franchise quarterback will say, well, you have to make the most of your situation. You have to raise the game of the players around you, and you have to show that you're the guy no matter what. And I think that's true to an extent. You've seen that with Joe Burrow early on in his career. But when you really look at this Giants team, do you really think this Giants offense as set up now, and take DJ out of it for now, throw in the best quarterback in the league if you want to, throw in Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, throw any one of them on this Giants offense right now. Do you think this offense will succeed throwing the ball 30, 40 times? You have an offensive line that, 9 games into the season, there was about 4 or 5 different, in-game lineup changes with the O-line. One guy's in, one guy's out, one guy's in, one guy's out. Neal, I know, has been out. That's hurt the team, as well as Bellinger. It's really hurt the team. And then you look at wide receiver. You have yesterday, Darius Slayton had another solid game. Did have a couple of drops, unfortunately. That's something that you got to kind of learn to live with when it comes to Slayton, but did have another good game. You had Wandale, great game, but he's gone. You had Hodgins, had a couple catches, but had the devastating fumble that ended the game essentially with 8 minutes left. And that's it. You really don't have much out there. You got Richie James. So you have an offensive line in flux, and you have probably, I know it's rated like 30th in the NFL, probably the worst receiving core in the NFL right now. And Jones gets in there, drops back, 40 times, whatever it was, throws for 345 yards, has 2 touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 1 passing, and fans are upset and saying that he didn't play well and he didn't do what he had to do. I don't agree with that. I think he did everything he could. The turnovers were absolutely on him. There's no way around that. He needs to be better. But saying Jones did everything he could doesn't take him off the hook for his turnovers. And that's something when you go to both sides of this Daniel Jones debate that's raged on for going on 4 years now, it's always all or nothing, right? It's always, well, he played horrible, wasn't good enough, but he did have a couple touchdowns. He did have some 50 rushing yards. Or on the other side, it's he played great. The turnovers don't matter. He was trying to make something happen. The truth is in the middle. And I think the truth is that Daniel Jones is having a hard time fully developing into what he could be because he just doesn't have the pieces around him. And the coaching staff had a rough game versus the Lions. Let's admit it. We'll start with the Adoree Jackson punt return decision. I was specifically against that. Honestly, I didn't think it made any sense. I remember the days of Jason Sehorn returning a kick versus the Jets in the preseason, tearing his ACL and never being the same. Now, there's the argument that, hey, these are football players. They're playmakers. You put them out there. They make plays. This is just a game. It's football, right? But I disagree, and I'll tell you why I disagree. This Giants team coming in was already decimated by injuries. You're already missing Aaron Robinson, who was your slot cornerback. You're missing Xavier McKinney, who got hurt in Cabo on an ATV. So you're already missing 2 key components just of the secondary. Just the secondary. But you want to take your cornerback 1 and put him on punt returns. Defensive backs are not used to getting hit. They're not used to being tackled. Yes, they're football players. I get it. But when you have guys that are in the league for 6-7 years and they play corner and they haven't been put at punt returner, that's an awkward position to be in. I understand Richie James had the 2 fumbles. You cannot tell me there wasn't someone else that could have won in and returned punts. You cannot tell me they couldn't pick someone up off waivers just to return punts. And if you want to send Adoree back there, football player or not, you tell him you don't return that ball unless it's wide open. You fair catch everything. You do not risk losing your number one corner when you're 7-2, making your way towards a playoff push, and you have the hardest part of your schedule coming up. I think this was the first kink in the armor of this coaching staff. Now, it's not something to be held against them. It's not something to say, uh-oh, what do we have here? It was just a bad core decision. And the juice was not worth the squeeze on that decision. Simple as that. And I noticed some people that disagreed with me. Some more well-known people disagreed with me. I get it. I understand. I get the whole football player thing. But this was an egregious mistake. And unfortunately, as goes with the Giants, when it comes to injuries, it was a disaster. Gets tackled at the knees. For a second, looked like he tore his ACL. Turns out to be an MCL. But you lose him for 4 to 6 weeks. You only have 7 games left in the regular season. And you're going to be going against CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. I thought this was a bad decision. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I hope it's not a precursor of things to come. I thought it was a tough game for the coaching staff. They didn't spike the ball towards the end of the first half when they were driving. Chewed up some crucial seconds off the clock. I thought the play calling was curious, to say the least. I thought the offense, even though they had their biggest passing day, could have did more. I thought Daniel Jones could have kept the ball on some of those RPOs where he had gaping holes. I thought he could have did a better job there. 8 penalties. And listen, some of the Giants' penalties that were called on them were suspect. But I'm not about to sit here in front of everybody and say, well, the Giants had some penalties called that shouldn't have been called, and the refs didn't do their job, and the refs didn't do this, and the Giants got beat because they came out versus a hungry Detroit Lions team, didn't play fast, didn't play strong, didn't seem like they wanted to be there for the most part, and they got their butts whooped. That's why they lost. And the 8 penalties the Giants had didn't help. So when you look at this and you have the Adoree decision, you have 8 penalties, you have some curious play calling, you have not spiking the ball at the end of the first half, basically giving up a play or two when you were already at midfield. This was that game. This was that game for the coaching staff where it was like, okay, reality check time. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'll tell you why. Brian Daboll is a first-time head coach. He's had a lot of success so far with the Giants. That's awesome. But he's still a first-time head coach. Mike Kafka, offensive coordinator for the Giants right now. First time as an offensive coordinator. You're going to have these bumps in the road. This is normal. The key, and what I have my eye on, is how do they bounce back? How do they bounce back on a short week? First the Cowboys, Thanksgiving, missing starters everywhere. You want to see the effort. You want to see the fight. If the Giants roll out and lose, hey, that's fine. The Giants lose. Cowboys are a solid team. But you want to see the effort. You want to see the fight. And enough with the penalties, enough with the stupid mistakes, 3 turnovers to add into that mix. And that's not how you win football games. Plain and simple. Defense had a rough day versus the Lions. Couldn't come up with the crucial turnover or stop that they've been accustomed to creating in the second half of games. All started up front. Goff dropped back 26 passing attempts, 0 pressures, 0 sacks. Basically sat back there and did whatever he wanted for Detroit. And same thing on the ground. Detroit has a great offensive line. I want to put that out there. But the Giants got to do better. Justin Jackson rushes 9 times for 7.3 yards per carry. Jamal Williams has 3 short rushing touchdowns. And Giants just got beat up front, plain and simple. Looking at some of the tape after the game, this linebacking core for the Giants is a problem. It's the weakness on the team. It's weaker than the interior O-line. It's weaker than secondary even now. It's just this linebacker core is probably one of the worst Giant linebacker cores I've ever witnessed. And when you're watching the game, Jalen Smith just taking on blockers, getting smothered, going in the wrong holes. Micah McFadden as a rookie looks slow. I don't know if that's just his reading the defense, the offense, processing the play slowly. Always looks a step behind. Tay Crowder's getting demolished at the goal line on all 3 touchdowns that Detroit had on the goal line. And I think that was a signal for the Giants and Giants fans Giants have been good in the red zone this season. They have the 26th most opponent attempts, but 8th fewest in touchdowns. And it didn't happen Sunday. Sunday, it was 3 short touchdowns, and they got bulldozed. And what the Lions did was show that, hey, if you're not going to get pressure from the edges, we're going to focus on Dexter Lawrence, and we're going to focus on Leonard Williams, take them completely out of the game, and we're not going to worry about it. Kayvon Thibodeau, invisible. Jahad Ward, invisible. Did nothing. I think Thibodeau had 1 tackle on the afternoon. And he's got to get better as a rookie. And, he's played well for the most part. He shows hustle. He shows fight. He's had pressures. He's been so close. He had the game-stealing sack versus Baltimore on Lamar Jackson. But can't have a game where you get 3 pressures on a quarterback and he just sits back there and does what he wants. And Jared Goff is not one of the best players in the NFL at quarterback. So the trenches was really where this game was lost for the Giants. And tried to come back late. Jones was trying to lead a charge. They scored. Richie James scored on a short touchdown. But 8 minutes left. Jones hits Isaiah Hodgins over the middle. Nice gain. And fumbles the game away. And that was it. Giants lose. They fall to 7-3 to Detroit. And you know what? It's 1 loss, but did feel a little bit heavier than that watching the game. And it was the injuries, and it was the fact that Detroit's scheme worked offensively. We're going to focus on the 2 beasts in the middle and not even worry about outside pressure. And then defensively, Detroit said, hey, we're going to force Daniel Jones to throw it every play. We're going to stack the box versus Barkley. We're going to make sure he doesn't beat us. And it worked. And that was the scary part. So that was it for Detroit, New York. Giants have to bounce back. They have the number 1 hardest remaining schedule in the NFL going forward. And there's no time to lick your wounds. You start to kind of think here now when you look at this game coming up, who do the Giants even throw on the field? Who's going to be at cornerback? Who's going to be at receiver? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's get back to the injuries. So, obviously, Wan'Dale out with an ACL. He's done for the season, probably into next season. You have Adori's out 4 to 6 weeks. You also, Fabian Moreau went down. Not sure what his status is. Tyree Phillips went down. Had some, big injuries. See Matt Pert come in for Phillips in that game. And I would say probably the most resounding question, I have a few questions after this game, but the most resounding was the 7-2 a mirage? Because that's what people are going to start thinking. It wasn't a hard schedule. You had some breaks go your way. You had some turnovers that are not common. If you play that same 9-game stretch 50 times, what happens? I don't think it was a mirage at all. I think the Giants played hard. They ran the football well. And that's something else we're going to get to because they haven't run the football well, and it's become a pattern the last 4 or 5 weeks. We'll get into that. But this is not a 1-game mirage. I think Detroit came in with a great game plan. I think the Giants came out flat, turned the ball over, penalty after penalty, curious play calling, and Detroit just took advantage of it. And you're going to get beat in the NFL. When you come out and you turn the ball over 3 times, you have 8 penalties for almost 70 yards. You can't stop the run. You're going to get beat. And that's going to happen again if the Giants don't get it together. A couple other notes. Like I said earlier in the show, I thought Daniel Jones played well. I didn't think he played good or great. The 2 turnovers were killer. First one led directly to a touchdown. Second one, even though it was on 4th and 5, ended a drive in Detroit territory. But I thought he played solid. I thought he made some big-time throws. 7 rushes for 50 yards, almost 400 total yards for Daniel Jones. And like I said, people out there are going to say he didn't do enough. The turnovers killed him. They were killer. But when you look at what he has out there, I mean, like I posed the question earlier in the show, who do you put back there that scores 30 points consistently with this Giants roster? This Giants roster is a bottom 5 roster in the NFL talent-wise. And it was that coming into the season. That's the scary part. It was a bottom 5 roster coming into the season, and they've lost a slew of players. Too many to even name at this point. This is one of the worst injury-riddled seasons I've seen for the Giants, and I've seen some bad ones. I've seen some rough ones. This one's right up there. So, let's talk about Barkley for a minute. Very curious with his usage in the passing game. So when you look at how Barkley's been utilized so far this season, he has 13 catches in the last 5 games. He had double that in the previous 5 games. Not utilize him as a pass catcher at all. I know he had the one drop versus the Lions, where it deflected off his hands. But to me, if you're short receivers and you don't have receivers, your starting tight end is out, who was also a rookie, and you have Saquon Barkley. I think they need to get him the ball more receiving wise. I think I know. And listen, the offensive line struggles with pass pro. They keep Barkley in. Barkley, to his credit, and I want to give him a major shout out. This was a big knock on Barkley in his career. Has really improved with his pass pro. So that may be a big key. Maybe they just need to keep him in there to help with the pass pro, but you got to get him more than 13 catches in 5 games for someone as dynamic as that. So that's curious. We talked about the linebacking core. Not going to get any better. It's going to be a struggle all year for the Giants. Giants fans are going to have to sit through watching teams run through them, unfortunately. You can't scheme around an entire unit being bad. You may be able to scheme around one player, but you can't scheme around the entire unit. It just is what it is. You hope Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence could get push up front against the run game, but teams are starting to run on the outside, getting to the hashes. That's a problem. Tibbs needs to step up more. Listen, you're a rookie. I get it. You haven't played bad at all. But when you got a game where, your defense can't get any pressure and you're the number 5 pick, we want to see you step up, kid. And you're a rookie, so not going to be a lot of heat this year. And you've produced some numbers and you have a great personality. By all accounts, a great kid. Need to see a little more on that field. He was going against Taylor Decker, who was one of the best left tackles in the NFL. But you would like to see a little something else. That's it. That's it for the Lions game. Like I said, it was a tough game. Giants came out flat, didn't have it, and doesn't get any better anytime soon because the Cowboys are right on deck, and they just whooped up on the Vikings, and it was brutal. 40-3, thrashed the Vikings in Minnesota, and Cowboys are getting healthy. And the Giants are going to limp into that Thanksgiving Day matchup. And it's going to be a tough one because Dallas is on a roll now after that game. That was their highest margin of road victory in the Cowboys' history. And that was against an 8-1 Vikings team. So, sacked Kirk Cousins 7 times in that game. Forced a fumble. Dallas also dominated time of possession, which they've been very good at this season. That's something the Giants can't have either with the way their offense has struggled. Dak Prescott, 22 of 25, 276, 2 touchdowns. He played well. And Cowboys are 7-3 now. The season, they have showed a lot of balance. They're 8th in the NFL in rushing yards. Surging pass attack now that Dak is back, which is awesome. And when you look at Dallas on paper, they have a very good roster. It's almost the opposite of what you see with the Giants because they have, like I said, passing attack with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb torched the Giants in the first game. CeeDee Lamb has 58 receptions right now for 750 yards, 5 touchdowns. He also gave the Giants 8 for 87 and a touchdown in the first matchup. And the Giants won't have Adoree, might not have Moreau, definitely not going to have Aaron Robinson. So that CeeDee Lamb matchup is going to be a tough one. And you turn around and you look, and you also have Tony Pollard. And if anybody's been watching Tony Pollard, he's a heck of a player at running back, and he's been crushing it. And versus the Giants in the first matchup, he had 13 carries for 105 yards. This season he's rushed for 700 yards, 6 TDs. He has 6 20-plus yard runs, which places him first in the NFL. 3 40-plus yard runs, which ties him for first in the NFL. And it's a dynamic dual threat, which should scare the Giants, especially that linebacking core. That's scary. When you got Tony Pollard who could line up in the slot, come out on a wheel route, those Giants linebackers, man, they got to get their stuff together because that's not going to be an easy matchup at all. On the defensive side of the ball, we all know Micah Parsons, what a season he's having. 5 multi-sack games this year. Really sucks. Could have been a Giant. Playing like an all-pro, has 10 sacks, tied for second in forced fumbles. He's everywhere. He's been amazing. Giants did hold him in check in the first game. He had 1 tackle in the first game, no sacks. So, can the Giants do it again? If he rushes on Andrew Thomas's side, I'm confident the Giants hold him in check again. Cowboys defensively, kind of a mixed bag. They have the number 1 secondary in the league when it comes to passing yards given up. It's going to be a big challenge for Jones and the MASH wide receiver unit the Giants field out there. But they've given up 1,745 yards. They also have struggled 5.6 yards per attempt. And I'm sorry, not struggled. They also have done well with yards per attempt at 5.6. So that Dallas secondary is no joke. That's an efficient unit, obviously led by Diggs, who whether he's boom or bust, those booms will kill you. All you need is one of those booms, and the game's over, or you're buried. And rushing yards given up, I think Dallas has been okay. Rushing yards given up, Dallas has struggled. And when you look at this Dallas defense, great against the pass, not so great against the run, and that's where the Giants need to strike. They need to be successful on the ground versus this Dallas team. That's where it's at. Not going to have a ton of success throwing against the Cowboys, especially on the road. Thanksgiving, on paper, it's not a favorable matchup for the Giants at all. Giants have struggled against Dallas. I think they've lost like 9 out of their last 10. And this is one of those games where, I mentioned it earlier today. For this coaching staff, this is one of those gut check games. You're going to be out missing a lot of players, several starters, short week on the road versus your arch rival who you struggling to beat the last couple of years. And this is one of those gut checks. And I'm curious to see not only how the team responds, how Jones responds, how Saquon Barkley responds. I think that'll tell you a lot about this team and where it's going the rest of the year. You definitely don't want to start a spiral here, because while you're 7-3 and things are looking good, you're going to need at least 9-10 wins, 10 most likely. And you got a tough schedule. Got the Eagles still twice, Commanders twice, Indy, Minnesota. So Giants are going to need to pull out 3 wins somewhere along the line here. And this is going to be a tough one versus the Cowboys. So we're going to get right into the matchups. And some of these matchups are not favorable, but we'll get into them anyways. First one is Giants secondary versus the passing attack of the Dallas Cowboys. So, first thing we'll get into is who's going to be out there for the Giants, right? You got Rodarius Williams, you got Cordero Flott, rookie, McLeod is probably going to be out there. It's going to be tough. You're going to have some inexperience out there. McLeod has played a decent amount of snaps this year. Flott has been in and out. He was hurt for a little bit. Rodarius Williams, same thing, just recently came back. I think the key here is pressure. When you sit and you look at this matchup, and you have third and fourth string cornerbacks out there playing first, second string. You have Dak Williams, you have CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard. You could not give Dak time to throw back there. He could not sit back there and make a sandwich on Thursday. There has to be pressure. Kayvon Thibodeau, got to get there, got to get home. Jahad Ward, Zimenez, whatever. Guys got to get home, and it can't just be off the blitz. Giants are the number 1 blitzing team in the NFL. They know they have to blitz because they're not getting pressure with that front 4, aside from Dexter Lawrence. I don't want to leave Dexy out. He's been phenomenal. But you have to get pressure. You have to get in there. That's the only way to stop this Cowboys passing attack, because you do not have the horses for the race. You do not have Adoree Jackson, Aaron Robinson. These guys are gone. And if you want to stay in this game, and you don't want it to be a shootout, and the Giants do not want it to be a shootout. Lions game was turning into a shootout, and they left the Giants in the dust. So this is going to be interesting. And, Cowboys spread it around. 5 players with 20-plus receptions this season. So they don't just rely on CeeDee Lamb and Pollard. They can mix the ball around. That's a sign of a good offensive team. And the Giants have to create that pressure up front if they want to disrupt that. Or else it's going to be a long afternoon. And the turkey's not going to be the only thing that gets stuffed. So watch out for that. And linebackers. Let's go to the linebackers also, because while this is a secondary matchup versus the Cowboys passing attack, these linebackers can get exploited easily. So need to step up. Want to see step-up play from the linebackers as well. And Dak has killed the Giants. Dak is the Giants' nemesis. Let's be honest. He's dominated the Giants. So get pressure. Get back there. Get pressure in his face. I mean, if the Giants have to blitz, so be it. But you want to see that pressure come naturally. So you don't have to have corners blitzing, linebackers blitzing. Because you don't want to leave gaping holes out there. You don't want to have CeeDee Lamb streaking down the sidelines or up the seam for 45, 50 yards. That's the last thing you want to see if you're the Giants. Okay, next matchup. Saquon Barkley versus the Dallas front 7. Is Barkley regressing? I think we could ask that question, and not as a player. Obviously Barkley's back. is having a phenomenal season. This is kind of more offensive philosophy related. He averaged 5.5 yards per carry the first 5 games, 3.6 yards per carry the next 5 games. So that's a regression, and you don't know what it is. Detroit had one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL coming into that game Sunday. Giants couldn't get anything going aside from a couple of decent Matt Breida runs. I think Breida should probably get a little bit more of a role in this game, whether that's in the passing attack. He had a nice catch versus Detroit, and he came in to spell Barkley, had a couple of solid runs. But I'm not sure what's going on with Barkley. I mean, Sunday versus the Lions, let's be honest, every time he hit the hole, he got stuffed. That's really what it was. I don't think there's anything specifically wrong. Yeah, the shoulder might be bothering him a little bit, and that's understandable. But Giants got to get that figured out because the Giants' offense goes as Barkley goes. And when you look at this Cowboys team, you have Van Der Esch, you have Parsons. Both are very good against the run. And something has to give because this passing defense of the Cowboys is top notch. So you have to run the ball. You're going to have to run the ball to take, heat off of Jones, to make sure he has open passing lanes, right? That's a key. If you could run the ball and you could have Dallas bunch 8 or 9 guys in the box, that opens up the play action. That opens up the RPO. That opens up regular option. That opens up everything. So the key offensively for this Giants team going into that Thanksgiving game, have to be able to run the ball. If this is a game, again, where Barkley gets 15 carries for 35 yards, this is going to be a loss for the Giants because they don't have the horses to get in a shootout. Plain and simple. That's my second key matchup. And the next one is Jones versus this Dallas defense. This Dallas defense, when you look at it on paper, they have most sacks in a single season through 10 games in the last 2 decades. 42 sacks in 10 games this season. And they victimized the Giants in that first match. I believe they had 7 sacks. And Jones struggled that game also. So very curious to see how Kafka and Dable game plan against that Dallas front seven. They are torturing. DeMarcus Lawrence had 3 sacks that last game. And also curious to see what the offensive line looks like, right? Do you get Nick Gates back at center? Do you end the Feliciano experiment? He has struggled this year. Let's just be honest. Feliciano has struggled at the center position, gave up 3 more pressures on Sunday, and it's tough when you get pressure up the middle. He struggled against the run. So I'm curious to see what the offensive line looks like. Obviously, you'll have Andrew Thomas at left tackle. You'll have Glowinski at right guard. Neal is up in the air. I think he's going to practice limited this week. Not sure if he makes it back on a short week. Not sure where Tyree Phillips is with his injury. Again, it's kind of early to tell. So you might see Matt Pert there next to Glowinski. It's really that left guard in the center position that the Giants need to figure out, right? Because you have Glowinski, right guard. He's fine. You have, hopefully Neal can come back, right tackle. He's good. Left tackle is obviously franchise left tackle. But that center and guard position, whether it's Azudu, really don't want to see much more of Shane Lemieux right now. I don't think he's ready to get in there with all the injuries he's faced. He's had a difficult go about it. I think the best lineup would be Thomas, Azudu, Gates, Glowinski, and if Neal could play. If not, then between Phillips and Pert, I like Phillips better. So that's going to be a key. Can this Giants offensive line stop that front seven? And, very important for this Giants team here to not spiral out of control, right? You had the McKinney injury a couple weeks ago. They come out versus Houston. Not their best game, but they come out versus Houston. They get a win, much needed. And then they come out flat versus Detroit to kick off this rough stretch of games. And you don't want the feeling to start of the second half collapses. Well, I mean, they haven't had a lot of second half collapses the last 4 or 5 years because they haven't been in it. But Giants fans know all too well the previous 5 years there was a lot of second half collapses. And you want to finish the season on a high note. Yes, there's a ton of injuries. Most teams probably couldn't make it through these injuries. Can't really blame them there. And I think Joe Shane and Brian Dable have done a great job up to this point of overcoming the injury bug and instilling the next man up. I think they've done an amazing job. But when is too much, right? When is it too much to overcome? When you're missing 3 of your top receivers, where you're missing 2 of your top corners, you're missing your top free safety. The list goes on. So very curious to see how this coaching staff comes out. I want to know your thoughts. Thank you for making it to the end of the show, of course. I want to know two things. How'd you feel about the Detroit game? And I want to know, how do you feel about the Dallas game? For the Dallas game, make sure you comment the score, predict the score correctly, and you get something out of my personal stash. Nobody's won the last 2 weeks, so I still got some stuff to give out. As always, it's all love. Thank you for your support. Please make sure you subscribe. Throw some comments in there. I love engaging with everyone. Check me out on Twitter over at TommyG105. Check out the Giants Country team. Always popping out great content. And until we meet again, peace.